All right, how's everybody doing today? All right. All right, so I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. Some people listen to me on 910 AM Superstation WFDF for 7 years, or see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered every Friday. So I've been asked to do a presentation dealing with the case for municipal reparations, okay? And you can come see me at the end if you need any of my information. I got flyers specially made up for you all today. All right, now, what I want to do in this presentation, hopefully everybody can see, is briefly, this is only 30 minutes. These are some key points that I want to deal with in this presentation. I speak across the country. I've spoken on multiple platforms dealing with reparations, including the California Reparations Task Force final report that came out June 29th, 2023. We'll briefly look at defining what reparations is, defining specifically with specificity what municipal reparations are, which is different than just general reparations, and why municipal reparations are a good option. But municipal reparations does not absolve the need for reparations at the federal level. We need both. What was Michigan's history of slavery? And that's important to understand, because even though slavery did exist in Michigan up until 1837, Michigan was not Mississippi or Texas or Tennessee or Alabama if you actually study the history. So it's a lot of things that happened after slavery ended in 1837 in Michigan, especially Detroit, that we definitely need to repair the damage of as well. Why did Michigan have such few slaves in comparison to Mississippi and Texas? Who has never heard of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787? Raise your hand. You never heard of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This is why it's important to understand history and law. And I spoke last Saturday for Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, my fraternity, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, our Black History Month celebration. And one of the things I talked about is history, economics, law, and politics. We have to understand all four: history, economics, law, and politics. I'll mention briefly the California Reparations Task Force. I'm gonna give you some sources in this presentation for you to do more research. Proper documentation ends all conversation. I tell people, you don't have to believe a word that I say. Go research this for yourself. Okay, you don't have to believe me. In Detroit's history of racism against African Americans. Okay, now when we look at this historically, the term reparations did not apply to slavery. Historically, when we talk about reparations, it was a levy on a defeated country, forcing it to pay some of the war costs of the winning countries. Reparations were levied on the Central Powers after World War I, 1914 and 1918, to compensate the Allies for some of their war costs. They were meant to replace the indemnities which had been levied after earlier wars as a punitive measure, as well as to compensate for economic losses. After World War II, 1939, 1945, the Allies levied reparations principally on Germany, Italy, Japan, and Finland. If we advance in history later, the meaning of reparations became more inclusive. It was applied to payments undertaken by the Federal Republic of Germany to the State of Israel for crimes against the Jews in territory controlled by the Third Reich, the Nazis, and to individuals in Germany and outside it to indemnify them for the persecution. The term was also applied to the obligations of Israel to the Arab refugees who suffered property losses after Israel's victory over the Arab states in 1949, okay, when they set up the state of Israel. If you go to Britannica.com, they have a good article there. This is just a summary of it. Reparations at Britannica.com. Now, when we talk about reparations for African Americans, especially from the federal level, okay? Just a working definition. This is not an endorsement of one organization over another, because I don't belong to any of them. But the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, better known as NCOBRA, defines reparations as a process of repairing, healing, and restoring a people injured because of their group identity and in violation of their fundamental human rights by governments, corporations, institutions, and families. At the root of the term reparations is the concept of repairing the damage that was done to someone, making them whole again, restoring them to a position before the damage was done. Okay. And as I explained to people, it's important for us to actually study what actually happened as opposed to what we think happened. because when we get deep into this, like if you read the 74-page executive summary from the California Reparations Task Force, their final report released June 29th, 2023. I've read the 74-page executive summary. I'm going through now reading the 1,000-page report. The history is mind-boggling. It's a wonder we survived. Okay, what was actually done to us and how law from the state and federal level and the federal government were used against us to continue to inflict the harm today. Now, those groups that have been injured have the right to obtain from the government, corporation, institution, or family responsible for the injuries that which they need to repair and heal themselves. In addition to being a demand for justice, it is a principle of international human rights, As a remedy, it is similar to the remedy for damages in domestic law that holds a person responsible for injuries suffered by another when the infliction of the injury violates domestic law. Okay. Examples of groups that have obtained reparations include Jewish victims of the Nazi Holocaust, coming from Germany, reparations primarily coming from Germany. They put about $90 billion in a pension fund. Okay, for Jewish Holocaust survivors. Japanese Americans interned in concentration camps in the United States, basically 1942 to 1945, $1.6 billion was set aside. It passed Congress in 1988. And they had a 10-year window from 1988 to 1998 to apply, and they got $20,000 each. Now, contrary to popular belief, this did not apply to all Japanese Americans. This was only issued to approximately 82,250. If you want documentation on that, I have it. And that only applied to the Japanese Americans who were actually survivors of the internment camps, or those who had to evacuate. It did not apply to all Japanese Americans in the United States from 1998 to 1998. Alaska Natives for land, labor, and resources taken victims of the massacre in Rosewood, 1923, January 1923. Whole town of about 200 African Americans was wiped out. That land was taken, and the city of Rosewood was removed from the maps. If you study the history, John Singleton directed a movie in 1997 called Rosewood. Excellent movie. A lot of fiction in it, but excellent movie. Rosewood, Florida, and their descendants, Native Americans as a remedy for violations of treaty rights, and political dissenters in Argentina and their descendants. Now, one of the things that has to be, and I'm going to continue with this presentation, but when we talk about Native Americans, for some reason, people keep leaving out the Black Freedmen and Indian treaties of 1866, which applies to Black people. And many of our ancestors were in those treaties, getting benefits, getting land, members of Native American nations like the Creek Indian Nation that founded Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1834. And when they went into Tulsa on the Trail of Tears, they took their Black slaves with them. Those treaties are still in effect today. And for some reason, we ain't trying to enforce those, except for Demario Solomon Simmons and Dr. Claude Anderson. But I don't understand why we not trying to enforce laws that are still on the books now being enforced for the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. So you can go to NCOBRA's official website as well, official NCOBRAonline.com for more information on this. Once again, this is not an endorsement on one reparations group or another. I don't belong to any of them. I'm just here doing a presentation. Okay, now, what are municipal reparations? Now, part of the confusion dealing with municipal reparations is probably one, because it's so new, and the city that led the way for municipal reparations at the city level would be Evanston, Illinois in 2021. I know Robin Ruth Simmons. I just interviewed her for the second time on the African History Network show Monday. This past Monday, she was the alderwoman at the 5th Ward alderwoman who spearheaded this reparations initiative in Evanston, Illinois. Municipal reparations deals with using policies, ordinances, etc., at the local city level to repair the city damage of discriminatory policies the city used to inflict harm upon a specific population. Generally speaking, the municipal reparations deals with a city repairing the damage that the city is responsible for doing, okay, throughout history. The cities across the country don't have the resources to repair the damage that the federal government did. But oftentimes they can repair the damage, or at least some of the damage that the city is responsible for based upon laws and policies put in place. Municipal reparations deals with the city repairing the damage the city was responsible for causing, not repairing the damage the federal government was responsible for. Okay, now, I think one of the problems that causes confusion with municipal reparations, and I'm not one that really advocates, this may go outside the covers of some people's awareness, but I'm not one that really advocates using the term reparations a lot, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, especially in this climate, in this country, with the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, with affirmative action and college admissions just being overturned by a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court that Donald Trump put in place. Okay, with what's going on down in Florida. Okay, you know, I liken it. Let me calm down. I liken it to this. Has anybody ever studied the history of slavery in this country? Raise your hand. I'm not going to give you a quiz. Just raise your hand. Who wants to answer this question? You don't have to come to the mic. Why did most slaves who run away at nighttime and not in the daytime? Don't everybody answer the question at the same time? Why did most slaves who run away at nighttime and not in the daytime?
They don't get caught.
Huh?
They don't get caught.
Yeah, but they knew they had a better chance of getting away. Yeah. Run away in the darkness. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, in the case of Evanston, Illinois, they did not have a history of slavery, but they did have a rampant history of housing discrimination. Now, in preparation for my first interview with Robin Ruth Simmons, I read a lot of their 70-page harm report that the local historian Dino Robinson put out because he was commissioned by city council. So anybody thinks you can do reparations without doing a harm report, I beg to differ with you on that. Okay. Now, what they found, you see, the state of Illinois abolished slavery in 1818. Okay. Different states abolished slavery different times. Michigan abolished slavery in 1837. And I'm going to get into this presentation. Michigan didn't have tens of thousands of slaves. 1837 at best, Michigan had probably about 23. Yeah. In 1837, about 73 in 1773. Mississippi had 430,000 in 1860. So don't take this the wrong way, but I when I hear people, and I speak across the country, and I'm on platforms across the country, when I hear people talking about slavery in Detroit, yeah, the Underground Railroad, Second Baptist. My mother's a historian of the Underground Railroad. Yeah, it was slavery here. This ain't Texas. Texas had 250,000 slaves in June of 1865 when Major General Gordon Granger goes into Texas to deliver General Order Number 3, which is why you commemorate June 19th. We don't even understand the history of June 19th because that wasn't the last day. Delaware and Kentucky didn't abolish slavery till December 18th, 1865. Tennessee didn't abolish slavery till February 22nd, 1865. So Juneteenth is not the last day of slavery. And the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free the slaves either. That's another conversation. All right. Now, reparations and any process for restorative relief must connect between the harm imposed and the city. Not what you think happened, but what actually happened, the harm imposed and the city. The strongest case for reparations by the city of Evanston is the area housing. Why? Because Evanston wasn't founded until 1853. Evanston was founded after slavery ended in 1818 in Illinois. Evanston, Illinois did not have a history of slavery. And I heard all these reparations people running around talking about that's not reparations for slavery. You're right, because they don't have a history of reparations for slavery. They don't have a history of slavery. Evanston is a city of 60,000 people. The black population is 16% and declining. A city is not going to try to repair the damage that the city wasn't responsible for creating. You got to go to the federal government for that. And so you got to understand, so this is why, see, my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, taught me how to do a systems analysis. Okay, this is why a lot of this stuff out here you don't see me involved in. Because I already know I ain't going to go anywhere. Because I'm listening. And I'm like, okay, the plan that you're laying out to try to get to where you say you want to get to, that's not going to get you there because you haven't properly analyzed the problem. All right, so the strongest case for reparations in the city of Evanston is the area housing where there is sufficient evidence showing the city's part in housing discrimination as a result of the early city zoning ordinances in place between 1919 and 1969, when the city banned housing discrimination. 1969, after the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Now, you have some people who say, well, we need a anti-black hate crime bill. Okay, well, that sounds good, but Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination, fairly assisted programs, is why race-based policies are illegal at the federal level. And I learned this when I was on a committee to write an executive order for the city of Detroit and the Kwame Kilpatrick administration. And our corporate counsel, Sharon McPhail, our very first meeting, because it took us 13 months to get this done, because it was much more complicated than we thought. Once we got in, took everything apart, and realized what we were dealing with, it took us 3 times as long to get this completed. And she told us at our very first meeting, she said it's illegal for us to write policies that are only for Black people in the city of Detroit. But what we can do is we can write policies for Detroit-based residents, which would disproportionately help African Americans. You have the same thing at the federal level. Go to archives.gov. Anybody ever read the 1964 Civil Rights Act? Like the whole act. Go to archives.gov, because I go read this stuff. I go study these laws. This is why you hear me talk about political self-defense. If everything they do to us, they use the law to do it. And then when they get caught breaking the law, they go hire an attorney at law to defend them in the court of law. So doing a systems analysis, that would tell me we need to understand the law better than they understand the law and learn how to disarm them of that weapon. That's political self-defense. All right, now go to because this is on the city of Evanston, Illinois' website. All this information dealing with what they did. You can read that. cityofevanston.org. Okay. All right. Now, compared to federal and state governments, courts, or private institutions, municipalities are the most suitable for reparations. Most suitable for reparations at the local level. Here's why. 2 reasons why. Of the various levels of government, they are the proper locus for 2 reasons. First, as Howard University political scientist Dr. Nyambi Carter explains, and I know Nyambi, we've been on Roland Martin and Filtered together before. She said there is a political will for reparations present in municipalities at the locals in the cities that is absent at the gridlock state and federal level. So the first thing you have to understand in doing a systems analysis is what is needed to advance what you say you want. How many votes are needed? How many votes does it take to get a bill passed in the House of Representatives? Who can tell? Don't everybody speak at the same time. Who can tell? 218. Bomani got it. All right. I got a prize for you at the end, Bomani. All right. Now, in the House of Representatives, unless it's a bill that qualifies for the budget reconciliation process, or unless you're dealing with judges because of what Mitch McConnell did to the Senate, how many votes does it take to get a bill passed in the Senate?
Votes.
Page 60. Okay. No Republicans in the Senate support reparations. So how you going to get a reparations bill passed? No Republicans, not even the black one, not even Tim Scott supports reparations. He was the first one that came out and said he wasn't voting for it. And none of the black Republicans in the House of Representatives support reparations either. So how you going to get it passed? Okay. I'm going to tell you how you get it passed, but hold on. Let's continue. Now, Dr. Nyambi Carter said, it's really local activists and local actors, members of city councils who are empowered in ways in their small communities to do things and to act outside of what the state would do and even the nation would do. Dr. Nyambi Carter, how you doing, brother? You all right? All right. So at the local level is where we have more power. At the local level is where we have, so in the House of Representatives, there are 435 members in the House of Representatives. There's we make up only about 12% of the House, and we make up 3.5% of the Senate. And I say 3.5% because half the time Senator Tim Scott don't act like he's black. So you get so that's what you have in the Senate. Okay, but across the country, our city councils 60, 70, 80%. Okay, now the reason why they're in place is because African Americans organized and voted and put them in place. And many of them, like in the city of Detroit, saw that because black people were harmed by policies from the city of Detroit, it was their duty to use their political power to do something about their harm. Now, if you're black and you get elected and you don't do anything to help the people who put you in office and repair the damage, then what the hell good are you? Okay, So that's why at the local level for municipal reparations, there's more power, and that's why there's been more movement. That does not mean we don't need repairing of the damage from the federal level. That means you're going to have to use another strategy, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. Okay? Now, by contrast, former U.S. Representative, the Honorable John Conyers, introduced a reparations bill in every session of Congress from 1989 until his passing in October 2019. But these bills never came to a vote. The farthest H.R. 40 has made is out of a budget, is out of a House subcommittee. And that was in like 2021. That's the farthest it's gotten. And although President Biden indicated his support for a reparations commission, any sudden action is unlikely. If you read the 1,000-page California Reparations Task Force, please don't take this the wrong way. We don't need another study. Okay? You know, who was that? Tina Turner had that song, "You Don't Need Another Hero." Look, if you read that, you don't need another study, because we're going to get studied to death. Okay? Now, I'm talking about at the federal level. You don't need another study at the federal level. Each municipality needs to do a harms report about what specifically happened in that city. Okay, now, this federal reluctance isn't entirely lamentable. Although local policymaking is often undervalued, decisions made closer to home can have larger impacts on Americans' everyday life than decisions made in Washington. That doesn't mean what happens in Washington is not important. It's extremely important. But at the local level, we have more control and more ability to use that power to bring about solutions to help everyday African Americans. Shay? All right, now, the second reason Dr. Nyambia Carter lays out, political scientists. Municipalities provide the opportunity for community-centered reparations that other levels of government do not. A local approach allows for powerful, close-to-home storytelling, enabling greater understanding of connections between past and present. In turn, this animates the development of thoughtful, conducive reparations. Additionally, municipalities can solicit input more easily from community members and encourage their involvement. Okay. Now, a municipality-based approach allows for accessibility and proximity between government and beneficiaries once the policy is in place. Such a plan can more effectively empower the community and enable rebuilding relationships with perpetrators of the injustice, if you want to rebuild those relationships. Now, so for more information, read this. This is a good report here. This is by Brooks Simone, University of Michigan Law School. It's called Municipal Reparations, Considerations, and Constitutionality. That's on pages 350 to 351. Part of the confusion is, and I searched online for hours trying to find a working, clear definition of municipal reparations. And I'm still searching. So when I graduated from Wayne State's Business School in 1994, okay? One of the things we learn is that it's very hard to solve the problem when you can't define what it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay. So the first thing, even though I knew what I wanted to put in this presentation, the first thing I had to do was come up with a working definition of what municipal reparations is. Otherwise, you're just shooting at a target you can't see. And then what happens is, just like how Republicans and conservatives hijack critical race theory, and critical race theory has existed since the 1960s. Okay. And they hijacked it and co-opted it and made it into what they wanted to be. Now, anything that deals with racism or slavery or anything like that, now they call that critical race theory, and then they attack it. That's why you have to clearly define what it is you're talking about. And see, that's why don't take this the wrong way, but see, that's why, especially on the national level, even here in Detroit, you have to understand right-wing conservative radio and right-wing cable news, Fox News. Fox News, that's the most popular cable news network. Now, if you watch it, you can say, you may say, how is this the most popular? These people are crazy. Well, look at the rest of America. It's representative, and they prey on fear. They help to spread the lies about what critical race theory is. Fox News. Okay. So one of the things I think in this city, across the country, we have to also develop better strategies on how we're messaging what it is that we want. And let me give you an example out of San Francisco. because I studied what happened in San Francisco. San Francisco Reparations Task Force, right? They released about over 100 policy recommendations. Somebody in the meeting, in the audience, said all black people should get $5 million reparations. No formula. It's not just $5 million. Okay. Now, if you go Google articles dealing with the California Reparations, dealing with San Francisco Reparations Task Force and their policy recommendations, the $5 million made up 80 to 90% of the media coverage. Now, apparently nobody did the math, because when I was on Roland Show and Faraji Muhammad Show, The Culture on the Black Star Network and then African History Network show, I broke down the math. There are 50,000 African Americans in San Francisco. When they put together their stipulations, requirements, because see, the state of California also has a similar law like the federal government where race-based policies are illegal. That's why the California Reparations Task Force had to structure theirs based upon lineage as opposed to race, because it's illegal. And they want to make sure anything that gets passed by the state assembly does not get overturned in courts. Because if conservatives sued to overturn President Biden's executive order on student loans, and if you had Roe versus Wade overturned by a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court, you think there won't be lawsuits regarding this? Absolutely. When I talked to Robin Ruth Simmons 3 years ago, she said the way they structured it coming out of Evanston, it was structured to be able to withstand lawsuits, because she said they knew they were coming. So San Francisco, if 20,000 African Americans get $5 million, that's $100 billion. $100 billion is 7 times the annual budget of the city of San Francisco that has an annual budget of $14 billion and was facing a 2-year projected budget shortfall of $728 million. And African Americans are 6% of the population of San Francisco and 6% in the state of California. So I have the video because I talked about this on my show. There was one city councilman from San Francisco. He was interviewed by a local news station, and they were talking about the $5 million. And he said, you know, we got over 100 policy recommendations. I'll be happy to talk about those. The white newscasters wanted to talk about the $5 million. They wanted to deal with fantasy, because what they do is co-opt something, right? Make it into what they want it to be, and then attack it to make sure you don't get. This is how they've attacked critical race theory. Okay, critical race theory is not taught in K through 12, not according to Moms for Liberty, not according to Fox News. So we have to be careful of this. All right, Michigan's history of slavery. Well, I'm on time. Oh, Lord. Michigan's history of slavery, okay? Historian Tia Mills, a professor in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies, and the 2011 recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. She cited in this article here, and I'll give you the name of it in just a second, but very quickly. Slavery in Detroit grew out of the bustling fur trade when the settlement was under French control. So Detroit, founded by the French, 1701, right? We learned that in elementary school, okay? The early censuses hosted by Tia Mills and her students revealed the number of slaves steadily increased through the years. Records from 1773 show there were 73 slaves in Detroit. Detroit ain't Mississippi, even though a lot of our people, my dad came from Mississippi, his family. Detroit is not Mississippi. By 1782, the number of African slaves more than doubled to 170, not 170,000, not 17,000, 170. Even after the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 took effect clearly prohibiting slavery. And in the Northwest Ordinance, everybody research this, it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the territory, because that's where the language from the 13th Amendment comes from, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And that wasn't created to re-enslave black people. We haven't studied the history of what happened. Slaveholders found loopholes in the language and continued as though nothing had changed. But look at what happened. And I'm going to skip some of this here. Okay, Jay Treaty 1793, in 1795, Detroit nearly had 300 African slaves. Read this article, Detroit's Dark Secret Slavery, Michigan Today, UMICH.edu. That's Michigan University, University of Michigan. The 1830 U.S. Census showed 32 slaves living in the Michigan Territory, because Michigan is not a state in the Union until 1837. 32 slaves in the Michigan Territory, because the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, what it did was it abolished bringing slaves into what was known as the Northwest Territory, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and part of Massachusetts. All right. That's why Michigan has low levels. Also, the climate in Michigan. And Michigan was not, slavery was not essential to the economy of Michigan, whereas slavery was essential to Mississippi because the #1 cash crop was cotton, especially after 1793. Okay, now, according to the terms of, no, skip over that. Let's go to this here. Although the treaty seemed to violate the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which prohibited slavery northwest of the Ohio River, the original settlers in the region were allowed to retain their slaves since they were considered private property. Michigan's territorial judge, August B. Woodward, that Woodward Avenue is named after, in Detroit, mandated that no new slaves could be introduced into the territory, and gradually those who remained would either be emancipated or die, so that by 1837, when Michigan became a state in the Union, and they had a new state constitution, it was created, there were only 3 slaves residing in the state of Michigan. Okay, once again, yes, harm was done. Okay, but most of that is done after slavery ends in the state of Michigan. Okay, now let's skip over all this here. Slavery, let's look at this. How many African slaves were in Mississippi? Let's compare Michigan to Mississippi. Slavery grew rapidly in Mississippi during the decades before the Civil War. Civil War 1861 to 1865. By 1860, Mississippi's enslaved population was well over 430,000. While there were only 350,000 white people in the state of Mississippi, yet most white people were not slaveholders, and even those who were, other than plantation owners, enslaved fewer than 10 African people. The state's economy was primarily based on the production of cotton, especially after 1793, when Eli Whitney creates the cotton gin. You have copies of the cotton gin, and then 1803, you have the Louisiana Purchase that doubles the territory of the U.S. and gives the U.S. more land to plant crops, which increases the need for enslaved African people. Let's skip over that, the rest of it. What about Texas? We celebrate June 19th, Juneteenth. In Texas, slavery had continued as the state experienced no large-scale fighting or significant presence of Union troops. Texas was a safe haven for slaveholders, so there were very few battles during the Civil War in Texas. So slaveholders from Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia would take their slaves into Texas. Okay, Texas had 250,000 enslaved Africans in June of 1865. All right. Now, although emancipation didn't happen overnight for everyone, in some cases, enslavers withheld the information until the harvest season. The next harvest season, celebrations broke out among newly free Black people, and Juneteenth was born. Read this article from history.com, official website of the History Channel. What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth and slavery in Texas. Okay. Now, read this article here dealing with the California Reparations Task Force. There's a link in the article to the full report, as well as the 74-page executive summary. California Reparations Task Force releases final set of recommendations, June 29, 2023, CNN. Okay, now I'm going to skip over some of this here, skip over that. The task force hired, the California Reparations Task Force hired a panel of experts, including economists, to calculate what Black Californians have endured. Through their formula, because they created a formula to do this. They determined that an eligible person could be owed up to $1.2 million. The formula includes dollars lost because of race-based health disparities, mass incarceration, housing discrimination, unjust land seizure, and other harms that have major impacts on Black Californians. California, even though they've identified somewhere between 1,500 to 4,000 enslaved people from 1850, when California becomes a state in the Union, to 1860. California ain't Mississippi, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee. California doesn't have a huge slave population either, but they have a deep history of segregation, housing discrimination, voter suppression, all those things, something similar to what happened here in the city of Detroit as well, and the state of Michigan. This is at archives.gov, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, non-discrimination, fairly assisted programs, which is why race-based policies are illegal at the federal level. Now, some people say we need an anti-Black hate crimes bill. Well, first of all, the first hate crimes act in the history of this country was signed into law in 1968 by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. It was part of the Fair Housing Act, and it's part of the modern day civil rights movement, largely for African Americans. Okay. Secondly, people forget somehow the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, which was the first anti-lynching bill in 122 years. This is Representative George Henry White in 1900, who's the only Black man left in Congress. Okay. Presented the first anti-lynching bill. Okay, now, there's a good article from NBCnews.com that talks about local reparations as well. Reparations gained historic momentum in 2023 because of California's efforts. Read that at NBCnews.com. Now, here's why I don't use the term reparations for what we want. 2/3 of Americans are against reparations. There's a Pew Research study that was done in 2021. Read this article here, Associated Press, apnews.com, February 24, 2023. Japanese Americans want redress, fight for Black reparations. Because you have some Japanese Americans who were siding with African Americans to get some type of redress restitution. Only 30% of U.S. adults surveyed by the Pew Research Center supported reparations for slavery in some way for descendants of formerly enslaved people, 77% of whom were Black Americans. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Support among Latinos and Asians were 39% and 33% respectively, and white Americans had the lowest rate of support at 18%. I think a lot of them watch Fox News. All right, now, one of the things that has to happen, yes, you have to have a harm report. That is extremely important. But two, focus, and I deal with this in my presentations, focus on present day structural inequities as opposed to just focusing on slavery, because present day structural inequities are the legacy of slavery. You have to deal with the laws and policies that were put in place that brought you to where you are and inflicted the harm. You can trace that back to slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. But many people mean well, but when I hear people just keep talking about slavery, 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 I'm like, have you studied history from 1865 to like 2024? And what was put in place? Show how these policies are beneficial for everyone, not just African Americans, since most of the people that got a vote on this, especially at the state, in the state legislature, okay, at the federal level, most of the people got a vote on this are not African Americans. So when you can show how these policies are also good for Americans, because policies that are good for African Americans are good for America in general, period. Okay. Now, last piece of evidence. Read this here, and I'm gonna sit down and shut up. Okay. All right. Now, California Reparations Task Force, unprecedented. They lay out unprecedented unprecedented history of 150 years of anti-Black harm. Okay. And if we look here, the California report covers not just the immediate impact of enslavement, 246 years in the U.S., but also the harms of decades of political neglect, finding that there has been sustained damage to generations of Black Americans. The damage has had a lasting effect on the political, economic, social, physical, mental, and cultural well-being of Black people. Now, what they do, they break it down into 12 harms. They tell you in the executive summary and the introduction, it's more than 12 harms that have happened, but they focus on the 12 harms. They lay out the history of what happened, and then the 115 policy recommendations are designed to repair the damage of the 12. Enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, housing segregation, separate and unequal education, racism and environment and infrastructure, pathologizing the Black family, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life, stolen labor and hindered opportunity. So a lot of that deals with in prisons, especially privatized prisons. Okay. Now, California did abolish privatized prisons right around 2020. Okay. That passed the state legislature and signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom. 10, an unjust legal system. 11, mental and physical harm and neglect. 12, the racial wealth gap.
The average 71-year-old African-American Californian has lost $1.2 million over the course of their lifetime. After 2 years of study, the California Reparations Task Force released an almost 1,100-page report that examines the historical atrocities committed against descendants of enslaved African-Americans in California and across the United States.
We hired 5 economists and public policy experts to help us determine the pure monetary losses of the African-American community since statehood.
To calculate those losses, the team assessed multiple harm areas, including mass incarceration and over-policing, health harms, housing discrimination, and the devaluation of Black businesses.
Our recommendations are not just about cash payments. That's just one of many recommendations that really are aimed at improving the quality of life of descendants of slaves in the state of California.
The task force made nearly 120 policy recommendations, ranging from cash payments to improving educational opportunities to increasing access to green spaces in African American communities.
Under international human rights law, there are 5 forms of reparation. So compensation or cash payments is just one, necessary element. But there's also 4 other elements like rehabilitation, so that can look like free healthcare, establishing wellness centers in African American communities, restitution, satisfaction. So that looks like a formal apology, for instance, for California's role in slavery, and exclusionary public policy after slavery. And then the fifth form of reparations is guarantees of non-repetition. So that gets at more structural and policy reform.
If you thought California didn't have enslavement, you're not alone. Moore says it's a common misconception. And while California was admitted to the Union in 1850 as a so-called free state,
there were over 2,000 Black people who were enslaved in California. And California also enacted a fugitive slave law that was actually much more aggressive than the federal fugitive slave law that was on the books at the time.
So how do Californians know if they could qualify for the reparations recommended in the report?
It's not a race-based standard, but it's a status or lineage-based standard.
That means those considered eligible are people directly descended from an enslaved African American or a free Black person living in the U.S. prior to 1900.
Reparations is a sacred political project. It started with those who were actually enslaved. Even during slavery and even, after emancipation, there's been a long line of activists who have been working tirelessly for reparations for African Americans, particularly those who are descendants of enslaved people.
The centuries-long fight for reparations has been fought in the face of what the task force describes as an ongoing genocide.
When we're talking about the elements of genocide, we're talking about, the killing of members of a group, preventing the birth of members of the group, deliberately inflicting serious bodily harm against members of the group, or mental harm. So we look at, for instance, the average African-American Californian who's descendant of slaves have a 7-year life expectancy gap between them and white Californians. That's due to, unequal funding of medical facilities, epigenetic trauma due to enslavement. We talk about the Black maternal health rates, Black infant mortality rates, Black women and girls, lead in those areas as well. So we make several different arguments in terms of how historically and presently those who descend from slaves are ongoing victims of a genocide, albeit slow and protracted.
So the question remains, will lawmakers take action to follow the policy recommendations in the report?
I am incredibly hopeful that state legislators will do the right thing and study our report with an open heart and mind, and by the end of 2024, early 2025, you'll probably see some reparations legislation being introduced by these state
Okay, now, Detroit's history of racism. If we look at 1930, the housing crisis, African Americans in the city of Detroit was systemically shut out of the housing market due to structural racism. Redlining played an integral part in the housing crisis. 1940, 80% of Detroit residents abided by racial covenants. So that was written into the deeds of homes that the homeowner could only sell their home to non-African American people, non-Negroes, white people. Okay, and that locked us out, many of us, from buying homes and accumulating wealth through the increase in the value of the home. Okay, now, 1943 race riot, June 1943, during World War II, up and down Woodward Avenue, 1943 race riot, I-375, removal of Black Bottom, sanctioned police brutality, 1967 rebellion. That wasn't a riot, that was a rebellion. And we have rebellions all across the country. 1990, 1995, takeover of Detroit public schools, Detroit bankruptcy as well, also over-assessing on property taxes. And when you study the history of that, that's one of the ways our land has been stolen from us. I got an article from the Washington Post dealing with African Americans. The value of our property taxes are oftentimes over-assessed, okay? And this has happened across the country. All right, now, lastly, this article right here, this proves my point here. This is a study from Citigroup Bank. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. This article is from CBSNews.com, September 23rd, 2020. This article deals with how over a 20-year period of time, not 246 years, just from the year 2000 to the year 2020, racism has cost the U.S. economy $16 trillion. They break it down three ways. One, Black workers have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. Two, the housing market lost $218 billion in sales because Black applicants cannot get home loans. Three, about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the U.S. economy because African-American entrepreneurs could not get access to bank loans. Then they go on to tell you What's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps, which are laws and policies and others, were closed today, the study indicated, which means when you do good by us, that helps everybody. When you help repair the damage that's been inflicted upon African Americans, that helps everybody. There too, Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters, said the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. We must take our minds back, and we do not ask permission to do it. All right, that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap up there. From Imhotep and Santi Simon, thanks for your attention.
Real quick, Michael, you had an announcement real quick. Go.
Yeah, join me Sunday, June 30th, 2024 for my new 10-week online course, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Most importantly, we look at how we fought back against white supremacy and racism, the various ways we did that. Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register today, watch the class live or on demand. We'll see you in class. Thanks,
all right,
Roland.
thanks a bunch. And again, folks, we'll see y'all tomorrow from the Poor People's Mass Assembly here in the nation's capital.
Join me Sunday, June 30th, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my new 10-week online history course, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I'm historian and national political commentator Michael Imhotep. You see me on the African History Network show and Roland Martin Unfiltered, as well as a Reba Martin show on KBLA 1580 AM. This class looks at history chronologically from 1800 through 1968 to 1971. And we look at what leads up to the Civil War taking place. We look at the Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, the Jim Crow era, World War I, World War II, Great Migration, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, and to get a better understanding of the different ways African Americans fought back against white supremacy and racism, how we fought back through armed resistance, how we fought back through economic empowerment and business ownership and the cooperative economics movement, how we fought back when it came to the labor movement and in the courts and legal strategies, court cases, etc. Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can watch this class live or on demand. Your understanding of history is based upon your understanding of politics. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Scroll down. We have my new Juneteenth lecture there. It's a 3-hour lecture. If you register for this class, you're going to get the Juneteenth lecture in digital download format, okay? But you can order it in DVD or digital download format. You can register for the first class I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Now, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch these anytime. So even after the course is over with, you can still go back and watch the class, okay? A year from now, 2 years from now, you'll still have full access, and you can watch the class. This content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children. Okay, so it's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. And it's very visual. So there's articles that we reference, books that we reference. I show you usually the book references on the screen, so you don't have to buy any of the books if you don't want to. But register here. We're going to do a class introduction right now. I teach this at my online school, so you can register for this course. Click right here, register for full course at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted a link here in the thread of the broadcast. You can also support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. It helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. There's some like 5 or 6 fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there that I have identified, like these right here. Oh, and you can click on a Cash App link right here. Here's our QR code. Okay. And then here's our link for PayPal as well. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, finance our Sunday night show, the African History Network show. I usually do that Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. on our social media platforms as well. All right, we have to get out of here. Hopefully you learned a lot today. You can email me through the website if you have any questions, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll see you in class. Remember, right now is correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay, so we'll see you in class. Listen to the African History Network show. And what kind of right now is correct wrong behaviors.